Um, and for the rest of us, I'm going to start in a way that may be potentially alienating to, who knows how many people in here. And I say that because I know that just in our neighborhood group, when a text went out about the Super Bowl this afternoon, one person said, "The Super Bowl's on Sunday?" And so, some of you may not care, have zero interest, and so let me alienate you. I want to start by saying that there is something about sports. Today is the Super Bowl, which means, there are a lot of people who really care about who wins today. They've picked a team. And sports have this way of revealing just the worst in our nature, in what it means to be human. One of my favorite podcast series of the last several years was produced, done, hosted by a guy named Michael Lewis. You might recognize that name, Michael Lewis, because he wrote the book, The Big Short, which is the book that explains how there were some investors, financial investors, who anticipated the market collapse in 2008, and they made a lot of money off of it. And so that book was about how these people saw what was coming in the housing industry. He also wrote the book Moneyball, which is a look at our recently local Oakland A's and how they won games with almost no money. So Michael Lewis, people know this guy. He did this podcast where it's called Against the Rules. And he is interested in and kind of obsessed with how American culture, people in American culture interact with and feel about the referees of society. And so he considers the referees in sports, he considers the referees who serve as judges, really anybody who has any role in officiating in society. He notes that American culture is such that we are primed to outrage against officials who we perceive to have done a poor job. And one of the things that Michael Lewis does in his podcast is reflect on basketball and the way that basketball referees have observably become better and better through the last 20 years at their refereeing. That there are a number of studies that have demonstrated this. That the league is invested in showing that their referees are actually pretty good and accurate, and they've invested in all kinds of technology, slow motion replay, all these things, right? And yet, at a time when referees in basketball are actually the best they've ever been, fans of the game are as convinced as ever, if not more, that referees are the worst they've ever been. And so there's this contrast between those who are tasked with judging and the perceptions of those who are either being judged or watching the judgments. And I think of Michael Lewis as I think about our passage this morning, because our passage this morning is all about the judge of the whole earth. Our passage is about judgments and justice. And it's asking the question, what kind of referee is God in the world? And Michael Lewis's podcast also offers us a warning to say our perceptions of God's ability to referee might be skewed by the team that we're rooting for. And that we are far more interested in an outcome that benefits us than an outcome that is truly good or right or fair. And so I let that kind of hang for us as we start to consider like what is happening in this kind of strange passage that we just heard the bakers read for us. And they read excerpts for us to try to give us like a sense of the whole. But let me just offer this as a chance to say we have a reading plan for you. The last 2 weeks, we've actually read this passage on our own at home. And this next week, if you read along with us again, you will have a chance to reread it. And let me just invite you to read it slowly, to pay attention, to find somebody to have conversations with. But these reading plans are out in the lobby if you don't have one and you want one on your way out. We set up this year and our time in Genesis saying these are stories that are designed to shape us. That they are designed to make us a certain kind of people in the world, to form us as the people of God, capable of doing God's work, of being God's people. What does that mean? That these stories are designed to shape us. I want you to think about the very first people who would have received the book of Genesis. The very first people to receive the book of Genesis would have been a community of people who were learning that there was actually only one supreme creator God. And that this one God is, as we sang earlier, holy. That he is utterly distinct from and different from all of the other gods that all of their neighbors had trusted in, had worshiped, had given their lives to. And these stories are designed to describe how this one distinct holy God named Yahweh is actually different from all of the gods of their neighbors. And sometimes that can be really helpful for us as we jump into it to think about, what is this story saying? How is this story explicitly making clear that Yahweh is different from all of the other gods? And I just want you to consider for a second what the other gods were like. Right? There were gods associated with the rivers, or gods associated with the moon and the sun. There were gods associated with the storms and the rain. And these gods would have been familiar to you if you heard any stories about them. They would have felt really familiar because they would have sounded just like people, just like super strong people. Right? So, the sun god, you can make him mad, like really quickly. He's like jealous. And he gets angry if you offend him really fast. And you start to realize as you listen to all these stories of all of these like various gods out there, that they're all basically just like fickle humans with super strength. And you go, these guys are kind of terrible. And they're really unpredictable because if you like take the wrong step, they might just kill you. But they also have this habit of claiming people as their own. So, any one of these gods might just say, you guys are my people. I've got you. And then another one of the gods would be like, yeah, well, I got them. And then we just battle each other out on a regular basis. Our God versus your God. If we fight you and you lose, our God is stronger. And a lot of the ancient world was just this. And the reason you might pick a people is because you wanted them to conquer the people of the other gods. And if somebody over there were to be hurt or upset, we would just mock them and say, their God is weak. If only they would come over to me. Ooh, they're weak. Let's go get them. It was a mess, right? I mean, basically, all of these gods just sound like middle school bullies. right? I mean, they're just looking for advantage, looking to take advantage. And then we come to this story. And there's a couple things I want you to notice. A couple things that happen that highlight that this God named Yahweh is utterly distinct. The very first thing comes in chapter 18, where we're told why Yahweh chooses Abraham and his family. It's not so that they can conquer all of the other nations and their gods. But he says in chapter 18, verse 17, Yahweh says, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him." Ooh, okay. So God has picked these people because he wants to bless the others through them. He says, "For I have chosen him, that he may command his children in his household, so that he may raise up his family after him, to keep the way of Yahweh by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has promised him." I just want you, righteousness and justice, ugh, like mouthful, those are such churchy words. Like, do we even know what they mean? The thing that's hard about these Hebrew words is there is no direct equivalent into English for either of them. And I find John Goldengay's expression of them to be really helpful, Old Testament scholar. But justice, the Hebrew word for justice, mishpat, it really represents the exercising of authority. So to have authority. And so you can actually do justice poorly, right? You can do justice in ways that hurt people. You can do justice in ways that is greedy and vindictive. You can exercise authority badly. But for God's people, doing justice is always connected with righteousness. And if you remember our time in the Sermon on the Mount last year, righteousness is about right relationship. And so think about exercising authority where you do right by the people that are under your authority, that are in your care. To exercise faithful authority. What that means is that God has chosen Abraham to raise up a family that will exercise authority, that does right by the people that are within his household. And through the centuries, we'll learn that will include the family members, the descendants, the people who are part of that family, but it'll also include the foreigners that come and take up home among them. And it'll include the outcasts among them. And it will even include the sinners among them, that they are to do right by those who are part of the household. But this is what our passage says, that it is for this reason that he has chosen Abraham, so that the rest of the nations might be blessed through him, so that when Abraham's family lives in this way, exercises authority in this way, the world sees, whoa, our gods are insane. They're crazy and selfish, and they just do what they want. There's something about Abraham's God that is beautiful and good. That the way that Abraham's family lives together is supposed to be for the world a light, an invitation. They are supposed to be a city on a hill, and we find ourselves having been grafted into this family, and we discover that this is actually our call, our invitation. As those who are called by God, we are the holy nation that lives in the world, that is called to exercise authority in ways that are good and does right by those who find their life among us. This could not have been more different than all of the other gods of the ancient world. The gods of the ancient world had no interest in any of this stuff of character or morality. You just did what you wanted to. You followed your desires. Yahweh was distinct in this way. And there's a couple more ways in which Yahweh is clearly distinct. And the story is showing that he is unlike the other gods. And one of them being, he hears the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah. And he moves to act. Right? As I said before, you might hear, if you were one of the foreign gods, you might hear the outcry of your neighbors, and you would hear that as weakness and vulnerability and a chance to conquer or to take over or to hurt or to oppress. But this word outcry is the exact same word from Genesis 4 when Cain kills his brother Abel and Abel's blood cries out from the ground. And so Yahweh hears in Sodom and Gomorrah this murderous outcry, the outcry of the oppressed. And he's going to do something about it. But what does he do? Again, Yahweh is distinct. We're told that he comes near. That God's instinct when there is pain in the world is not to remain distant, but to come close, to enter into, to find his life among. God comes, and he says that he wants, this is the very end of verse 20, chapter 18, because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great and their sin is very grave, I will go down to see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry that has come to me. And if not, I will know. I just want to ask this question. Does that sound weird to you when you think of God? I mean, listen to it again. Because of the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great and their sin is very grave, I will go down to see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry that has come to me. I'm gonna see whether it's happened. I'm gonna see according to it. It's kind of interesting, right? I don't know how this impacts your view of God. Knowing everything and instinctively knowing exactly the right thing to do at any given moment. Maybe this is God just showing Abraham how he should respond if he is going to be a light to the world. But notice, God has heard the cry. And his response isn't to react. It's not to respond with immediate outrage. It's not to immediately strike down or whatever. There is a distance. There is a patience. There is I'm going to come and see for myself. And I've been thinking a lot about this lately. It might just be because I spend way too much time on social media and reading the news that I'm just struck by how often I think I know things because I've read it somewhere. Like I've read somebody telling me from somewhere around the world that something bad happened, and I don't know. I just go, yeah, that must have happened, and I care about it, and it's important. And I'm just struck. by how little I actually know. Maybe how little I can know about something that has happened far from me, distant from me, disconnected from my life. And I hear in this passage an example from God that says, hearing is one thing. But then what does it mean to move down and to see, to actually know? The next scene is maybe one of the most incredible scenes in Genesis, because God's justice, God's goodness is challenged by Abraham. And at no point does God feel threatened, appear threatened. Is God reactive? Like, just shut up, Abraham. Know your place. No, actually, at the heart of this passage is an invitation for Abraham to ask these very questions, to know from God what God knows, to know from God who God is, and what God is like. That's what these stories are written for. They reveal to us what God is like. And Abraham understands, yeah, there are some terrible things that are happening down in Sodom and Gomorrah. Ezekiel will describe it later as various kinds of oppression, but at a minimum, the crying out echoes the blood spilled by Cain. And so Sodom and Gomorrah is a place of incredible violence, where creation is being ripped apart. The humanity of the people who live there is being shredded. And so God says, it is time to do something. And Abraham worries. Are you just going to destroy this place if there are some innocent or righteous people there? And I love the back and the forth, because, I don't know, Abraham just comes up with a number, 50. And God's like, no, of course, I won't destroy it if there's 50. Okay, God, sorry, I don't mean to be, but how about 45? No, not 45. And they go back and forth, 40, 30, 20, 10. Every time I read this, I always go, why'd you stop at 10, Abraham? Why didn't you get down to 1? Like, 1 is actually a really important question. If there's one person who's innocent and righteous there, God, will you destroy them? What is God like? Does God just walk around destroying the innocent and the righteous as that's a consequence of war? I mostly killed the guilty people. What is God like? These passages are a meditation on who God is and how God deals with the very worst of human sin. And that brings us to the very last there's more, but the last point I want to draw out about how Yahweh is distinct from the other gods. Because what we find in the very last story that we read was, and I don't know why I picked you guys as Abraham's people, but Abraham's people, right? They come over and they lie to King Abimelech and put King Abimelech in a compromising situation. The gods of the nations would say, now we get to get them. Like, look they're compromised. Let's get them right now. But the God of Abraham steps away from whatever loyalty he has to Abraham in this moment, and he comes to King Abimelech, and he speaks to him. He speaks to the foreign king, and he reveals what's at stake, and he invites him to trust him and to act in a particular way. And in this moment, we're reminded again that as much as Yahweh has claimed a people for himself, if those people will not be faithful, will not exercise authority in right ways on behalf of others, God will work around them. Because God is always working not just for Abraham's family. He's working for the blessing and the restoration and the redemption of the whole world. God only ever chose Abraham to bring salvation to the world. That's their job, their purpose. Not so that they are somehow unquestioned in all of their actions, but they have a task and they're called to do it faithfully. And if they don't, they're held accountable by God. It's an amazing moment, right? Because we look at judges, we look at referees, and we get mad when they don't side with our team. And when we read the Hebrew Bible, there's this weird thing that happens where God is constantly not siding with his people. That's what the prophets are there busy doing. They're referees saying, you're my people. You had a job. Why did you stop doing your job? Just do it. It will be good for everyone. Remember why I called you to be my team. This is one of the ways that Yahweh reveals himself to be different. He might claim a people for his own, but it is not against the neighbors. It is for them, for their blessing and for their sake. God is a trustworthy judge who is good and reliable and faithful. This is how the scriptures reveal him. And to make that case final, I want to read for us from the very last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation. There is one who shows up in the book of Revelation, chapter 5, weeping because there is no one found who is worthy to open this scroll that exists in this book. And one of the elders says, "Weep no more. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah has conquered so that he can open the scroll and even its 7 seals." Has conquered. Ooh, like what does that mean? Here's the song that gets sung about this conqueror. Worthy are you, Jesus, to take the scroll and open the seals, because you were slaughtered, and by your blood you ransomed people for God from every tribe and language and people and nation, and you have made them all to be a kingdom and priests to your God, and they shall reign on the earth forever. The Bible is constantly making the case that God is good and can be trusted, that God hears the cries of the oppressed and comes near. And in the story and the life of Jesus, this is what we see: God taking on human flesh and coming near, and then offering his life as a sacrifice, as a gift for those who deserve judgment. God says, I offer you mercy. And James will say, mercy triumphs over judgment. And so we come to the table this morning to remember the mercy of God that saw us in our sin and said, I won't punish you because of the sins the punishment that you deserve. I will die for you. I will give up my life as a ransom for you. I will give you life.